Сейчас я бы хотел передать слово господину Мохаммаду евразиатских исследований ИРАС. Пожалуйста, господин Казими, вам слово. Господин Казими, вы нас слышите?
Hello, can you hear me?
Да,
Yes.
Салам.
If you can hear me and if you can see me, I'm ready to start.
Пожалуйста. Да, конечно.
Hello, everyone. Thank you from RIAC for inviting me to this virtual conference. First of all, I want to thank everyone, every expert that talked in this virtual conference. And I really enjoyed the talks from my Iranian colleagues and from all the other countries which, like us, have been affected by sanctions, by unilateral sanctions. Well, my friends all talked about different issues of sanctions regarding the unlawfulness of unilateral sanctions by the United States, especially by the United States against countries. They talked about the human rights effects of the sanctions, the negative effects of the sanctions on free trade, on global trade, on food security, and other issues. And I really enjoyed these points mentioned by the friends. But one thing that here I'm ready to talk about, and I have prepared, is a step forward regarding the sanctions. You know, as it was mentioned, the world is in transition now. Okay, the world is changing. When the world is changing, it means the main components of this world is also changing. And one of the main components of the leaders of the current world has always been unilateral sanctions, or in general, weaponization of dollar or something like that. Okay, so if you want to move forward and have a better, I don't know, have a kind of pathway in order to deal with and engage with sanctions, we need to, first of all, we need to have a better knowledge, I mean, technical knowledge of the sanctions. And secondly, we need to provide some suggestions in order to neutralize the sanctions. And the second is completely dependent on the first. I mean, as long as we, as the sanctioned countries, are not completely aware technically on how sanctions work and how some issues, I don't know, some places like TFI in the United States Treasury Department work, then we cannot move forward into neutralization step. So I have prepared my presentation today in two parts. And in the first part, I try to explain, of course, very briefly, the structure of sanctions, I mean, the unilateral United States sanctions against Iran. And secondly, I want to tell you how we can counter the sanctions. And by we, I mean all the countries which have been, to some degree, more or less affected by sanctions, by the United States sanctions. It can be Iran, it can be Russia, it can be Cuba, Nicaragua, Belarus, any other countries, and very, very likely China in the near future. So if you let me, I'm going to share my screen with you. If I can find the window here. I want to share it with you. This is my presentation here. I don't know now if it is possible to see it or not. Okay.
Да, все отлично видно.
All right. You know, yes, my presentation is structured in two parts. The first part, I want to talk about the legal infrastructure of the United States sanctions against Iran. And I try to be very quick in order to save time. You know, United States sanctions against Iran started from the very beginning of the Islamic Revolution in 1979. And from that time until 1996, Iran faced the primary sanctions of the United States. The primary sanctions of the United States, which came into the field with numerous executive orders by the different presidents of the US, had some features. It was limited to US jurisdiction, and US-Iran bilateral ties were affected by that. It means that there was no other countries. It was between US and Iran, and all the American people, all the American traders and others were denied from accessing Iranian markets and working with the Iranians. Well, the primary sanctions were not as restrictive as the United States needed in order to stop Iran. And to be honest with you, it was a nervous and hostile reaction to the revolution that happened in Iran and somehow changed the scene in the Middle East. But from 1996, things changed. The United States understood that the primary sanctions do not work very well in order to restrict Iran enough. So they started the secondary sanctions, of course, the first generation of secondary sanctions. It started with LSA Act or ILSA Act in 1996, which was Iran and Libya Sanctions Act. Of course, after 10 years, the L was eliminated because the Libya issue was over, and it turned into ISA Act, Iran Sanctions Act. And after that, in 2001, there was an act in the Congress of the United States which was called Patriot Act, which its focus was on targeted financial sanctions. Financial sanctions issue came into place in 2001 after the attacks in New York. In that time, we had Executive Order 13224 by George W. Bush, which was about countering terrorism in 2001 with the sanction tag STGT. And after that, in 2006, we had another Executive Order 13382, which was for countering proliferation of weapons of mass destruction, or WMD. And the tag was called NPWMD, non-proliferation of WMDs. And after that, in 2008, we had a very important action by the United States. They started to prohibit the access of Iran to international financial system, or the U-turn restriction. Okay, the first generation of the United States secondary sanctions, and by secondary sanctions, let me clarify, by secondary sanctions, we mean the sanctions which not only the Americans were denied from trading with Iran, but all the countries in the world were affected. And the reason is quite clear. The countries and the banking system and everything is completely dependent on the United States. The international financial system, which is completely dominated by the United States. All right, the first generation of secondary sanctions were rule-based. By rule-based, the Treasury Department started designating some entities, and by designating, identifying them and putting their names into the SDN list, or the list of sanctions, which OFAC in the United States Treasury provides. And after that, when an entity or a person, an individual, was identified and designated by OFAC, any service providers to them or any affiliates of them were also designated by OFAC. So it was a circle with an ever-expanding radius. Just look at this picture here I have provided. One entity in Iran, for example, the Central Bank of Iran, gets designated by OFAC, and then anyone working with that, of course, not two, but many, if they continue cooperation and having an engagement with the target, which is CBI or Central Bank of Iran, then they are also sanctioned, and so on. You can see the others who are working, that they also get sanctioned one after the other. So it was like an infectious and transmissible virus, which spreads all over the world. In this type of sanctions, the Treasury Department is responsible to implement the sanctions. You may ask, or you may wonder, okay, who else is going to implement the sanctions? It is the Treasury Department. Yes, but in the first generation of the sanctions, I mean secondary sanctions, I will explain it later in second generation that the United States is doing something else and Treasury Department is just managing the issue. Another feature of these types of sanctions was that they were straightforward and very easy to comply. I mean, the only concern of the banking system in the world, the banks, the financial institutions, were not to provide any service to the designated entity. It was enough. If a bank was going to start a transaction with an entity, it was just enough that that bank takes a look at the website of the Treasury Department of OFAC and check if the name of that individual or entity is in the SDN list or not. If it was in, they stopped working with that, or if not, they could work with that. Very easy, very straightforward, and it was not very sophisticated. One of the problems of this type of sanctions was that the US Treasury or OFAC was always one step behind. I mean, they started sanctioning one entity, and that entity which was sanctioned started to make some front companies, sophisticated networks, and continue their work with all of the trading system that it had in the world, but with other names. So the United States Treasury or OFAC in the next step was trying to identify the second one, the third one, the fourth one, and so on. And so they were always one step back. Okay, this type of sanctions, I mean, the first generation of secondary sanctions were affecting countries in company level, not in state level. I mean, they were not suitable for stopping a big government, a big country, a big state like Iran, like Russia, or any others to stop working with the world. And the harm was completely inflicted on private companies. Another result of this type of sanctions was that Iran was denied from dollar, as I mentioned before, and it prevented Iranian entities from access to international financial system. But something very important happened in 2010. I mean, the first generation of the United States secondary sanctions got over in 2010 because the United States came to a conclusion that this type of sanctions, because of all the deficiencies that it has, cannot stop Iran. And Iran was going on, even though we had a lot of negative effects of the sanctions, but Iran was not stopped in a way that US liked it. So they tried to design a new system of sanctions, which I call it the second generation of secondary sanctions, and started to establish the infrastructure which was needed for that. Everything started, I mean, the initial idea started in United Nations Security Council Resolution 1929 in June 2010. And after that, it got operational. I mean, the secondary sanctions, second generation of secondary sanctions, it got operational with CISADA Act in the United States Congress in July 2010. And after that, the US Congress had a lot of acts like NDAA 2012, ITR SHR 2012, IFCA 2013, COTSA 2017, and others in order to solidify the structure or the infrastructure of the United States second generation of secondary sanctions. And as you see here, they started to affect all the sectors in Iran, financial sectors like banking of Iran, after that shipping, insurance, some very important places, some very important entities like National Iranian Oil Company and National Iranian Tankers Company, NIOC and NITC, and many others. The Central Bank of Iran, all Iranian banks and others, they were designated in energy sector, in shipping sector, in shipbuilding sector, and many others. And after that, with COTSA 2012, the United States focused on IRGC and its affiliations. And we also, not only the congressional acts, but we also had some executive orders, which you can see the list of them here, And very recently, in 2024, we had the SHIP Act, or Stop Harboring Iranian Petroleum Act, and some other acts which was ratified against Iran in the United States Congress. They had some features. I mean, the second generation of secondary sanctions has some features. It's not rule-based like before. It is risk-based. The structure is completely risk-based. What do I mean by that? By risk-based, I mean the United States makes a very huge SDN list, countless designations, hundreds of designations, hundreds of names of individuals, persons, entities. They just put the names into the SDN list, and they start a very rigorous and close monitoring of global transactions. I mean, they check the transactions and incur risk to all parties engaged in a suspicious transaction chain. In rule-based sanctions, I mean, in the first generation, one entity was in the SDN list, and everyone in the world, when they wanted to work with that specific entity, they just checked the website of OFAC and they understood that if they can work with that or not. But in this type of sanction, I mean, the second generation, the OFAC didn't mention any special name. They put all the names in the SDN list, and they told the world that if you want to have any kind of transactions, it's okay. But if we understand that one part of this transaction has benefited one Iranian entity which has been designated and its name is in the SDN list, then you are responsible and you should pay the cost. I mean, you should pay the fine for that. And they did it. They did it. Another feature of this type of, risk-based sanctions is ambiguity. If you remember, the first generation was completely straightforward, but here everything is ambiguous and the environment is hazardous. I mean, the financial environment of the world becomes hazardous because every bank should assess the risk of any transaction, because this transaction might somehow be engaged with an Iranian entity. So the banks started to do a kind of cost-benefit analysis, and they normally come to conclusion that it is very hard and very costly to comply with this type of ambiguous sanction system. So they put Iran away very easily, and they say, okay, we work with all other parts of the world which are not sanctioned, and I do not work with Iran. I don't want to work with Iran if I want to lose my, my access to international financial system, or to my, for example, my banking relation with the United States, with New York, with Wall Street, and stuff like that. So in this type of sanctions, the world is responsible to implement the sanction, not the United States Treasury. Okay, so it's a kind of outsourcing. And I remember that when some officials of Treasury departments were talking about this type of sanctions, they were very happy because they said we reduced the cost of implementing or imposing sanctions in our governmental entity, and we just outsourced it, and the world banking system is now obeying our rules. It is not one step back. It is not always behind the so-called violators, and it is suitable for states and large-scale economies, not private companies, small ones. And not only it has economic effects on the target country, it has some meta-economic effects. This type of sanction is a kind of isolation. The profile of the target country gets changed. Everyone in the world who like to be compliant with the United States, with the sanctioning system, and with the international financial system, try to isolate the country which has been sanctioned. And it's a kind of defamation. The country, like Iran, becomes, in their literature, becomes a predatory and malicious actor. And the effects were clear from 2010 until today, which this type of sanction is going forward. Iran has been affected in a state level, great harm to the government, and Iran has been denied not only from dollar but from all other currencies because of the system, because of the financial system. And it prevented the international financial system from engaging with Iran completely. It was the first part of my presentation. My goal in that part, I mean, the first part, was to provide a very initial understanding of the underlying principles of the United States unilateral sanctions against Iran and against any other countries. Now the RYAC is a Russian entity. I want to say that the United States sanctions against Russia after 2022 has now reached at this place. I mean, US sanctions against Russia is now the second generation of secondary sanctions. So we have the same problem, and we are in the same boat, and working together can really help in this way. But how to counter them? I believe if you want to counter the United States unilateral sanctions, you need two things. First of all, you should identify the system. You should, I mean sanction system. The sanction system has some components, has some interactions, has some tools, etc. So identifying the system is the first step, and I think, and in my opinion, the most important step. What are those components? What is this system? This system is based on the current international financial system, which is completely US-based after World War II and after Bretton Woods system. Another pillar of this system is dollar. Dollar has become the global currency. As long as dollar is the global currency, then the United States has the capability to run the system, okay? Another one is petrodollar cycle. Iran and Russia and many other countries have a lot of oil, and they sell their oil to many other countries. Iranian currency is rial, Russian currency is ruble, and the currency of the purchasers is not dollar. But as you see, we have seen a petrodollar cycle which links oil trade in the world with dollar, and this is one of the tools of this system. Another one is the dominance of United States over global transactions. Another pillar is SWIFT and its component and its cooperation with Treasury Department. Another one is FATF. They all help the United States to solidify its sanction system. You know, U.S. Treasury Department has ironclad ties with U.S. Treasury Department. It is now completely clear. And now that we can understand and we can know the components of this system, then we can talk about dismantling the system. I mean, if you want to dismantle the system, first of all, you should get rid of current financial system and establish a new one by the cooperation of the countries which have the same problem, sanctions. I mean, Russia, Iran, China, Nicaragua, I don't know, Cuba, and many other countries, Belarus and others. They can work together to establish a new financial system. This is very, very important. And another one is getting rid of dollar, at least in bilateral ties or in multilateral ties or relation between each other. And the third one is setting up sanctions-proof messaging system. They shouldn't, I mean, the sanctioned countries should not use SWIFT. I want to stop here, and I have some very brief final points. And I'm not going to talk about the other types of analysis about sanctions. And I stop here because I think I have spent a lot of time, and I come back just to you. And first of all, I thank you for listening to me. And I want to wrap up my words with this very important issue that if the sanctioned countries just sit together in virtual or in-person conferences like this and talk about the harms that they are receiving from sanctions, or why the United States is sanctioning, or the United States is a bad actor in the world, it is unlawful or something like that, it is not a step forward. I think in the changing world, in the world that is in transition, we really need to think forward and move forward And the first step of that is understanding the structure of sanctions, and then having our own plans, having our own strategies in order to get rid of this system. Getting rid of the system, in one part, it is related to our knowledge of the system. In the second part, is related to our will to put the system away and try to establish some new systems. I was really happy to present my words in this virtual conference, and I hope RIAC and Iranian counterparts and other countries, they work together in order to hold more of these types of conferences, virtual or in person, in order to make a new ecosystem which is based on standing against this kind of unilateral coercive actions by the United States. At the end, I once again appreciate RIAC and all the distinguished experts who spent a lot of time listening to me. I thank you very much.
Спасибо большое, господин Казими. Тоже много вопросов. Слушал. Много вопросов, которые согласуются с нашими дискуссиями здесь, в России, в том числе и по вопросу транзакций в национальных валютах. Мы все хорошо знаем проблемы, которые здесь возникают, и с фрагментированным платежным балансом, и со сложностями проведения этих транзакций, техническими. То есть эти проблемы решаемы, да, но над ними, конечно, нужно продолжать работать, как и над другими вопросами. Спасибо. И опять же, мне понравилось ваше выступление тем, что вы дали очень глубокий анализ и правовой базы, вторичных санкций, и ввели несколько терминов, которые для нас являются новыми, в частности, термины первое, второе поколение вторичных санкций. Это интересный такой ход. Я бы с удовольствием почитал уже глубже ваши наработки. А сейчас у нас мы завершаем иранский блок.